Hi everyone, in the last tutorial I showed you how to take data from this form and put it into a kind of database worksheet over here. And in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to search for the data over here and have it populate this form. So it's going to work like this. I'll add another button throughout this tutorial, but for now hit a button, get this little pop-up window, type in the ID number, hit OK, and the data populates the form. It's a really cool little thing that we're going to do here. And don't forget that I'm starting up premium courses on teachexcel.com, and those should be up soon. So there's a lot of stuff I can't fit here on YouTube, and I'm very excited to be able to put that into a more fully fledged course. Now let's get started with this tutorial. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to Teach Excel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials. And here I do assume you've seen the previous bulletproof or idiot-proof forms in Excel tutorial, so I'm not going to recover any of that stuff. But before we get started on this tutorial, the very last one, I did make one tiny little mistake. If we go to the Data tab and zoom in a bit here, we can see that the usernames ended up here and the IDs here, and I meant to reverse that. So let's quickly go ahead and fix that. It's a really easy thing to do. Alt F11 to go to the VBA window. Remember, we have to open this and use our password 123456. Please don't use that password for your own projects. Open up modules, go to module 2. Store data is the macro that we worked on last time. And all you have to do is go down here to the section where it says input the form values into the data sheet. And you'll notice that what I did is I got range F6 and F4 here, so I reversed it there, but then I also reversed it here. So F6 is the cell that has the ID in it, and we want that to be in column 1 on the data sheet. And then in column 2, we want the name. So F4 is the name. That's the cell that has the name in the form. So just change that one little thing right there. Alt F11 to go back. Go to the form. You can see here the ID is F6 and the name is F4. Now it got messed up here because when I pulled the data from the data sheet, it was already reversed. So let's go ahead and put that back how it's supposed to be. Okay. Try it again. Submit. Success. Let's see if it was. Perfect. ID number here. Name here. Now let's go ahead and fix one record for Judge Dredd. And delete these other guys so we don't get any confusion later. All right, let's get started now. So the first thing that we want to do, I thought of a couple different ways that we could put the search feature into this form, but I didn't want to mess up the form too much. So instead of putting a little field up here where you input the ID number, could lead to a bit more confusion, I figured let's put a button down here, click the button, have a little window pop up. Show you guys a new way to get input into the form or into Excel at the same time as keeping our form nice, neat, and clean. Now the first thing we need to do to put the button down here is we need to kind of undress our form. Remember, this is all protected and kept safe so that the user can't mess it up. So let's go to Review. Let me zoom out a little bit. Click Unprotect Sheet. Our password as usual, 123456. Enter. Now we can go ahead and select everything else. I'm going to go ahead and bring back the headings and the grid lines just to make sure we know what's going on. And let's unhide all of the data. So I'm going to click here to select all of the cells and make the text color black. And there we go. Okay. Now what we want to do, zoom in a little bit, just go down here to the bottom part of the form, and all I want to do, okay, so right click the button, and if you accidentally click the submit button, remember the way the macro works is the form is reprotected. So go back to the review tab, unprotect, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, right click the little button. Okay, now go to copy, then just hit Control V to paste it or right click paste. Now we have two buttons. Let's drag this guy over here to the left. Try and keep it the same. Now I'm going to right click this guy, click away once again, and I'm just going to use the arrow keys to push them over to the right. So this way, it is at the exact same height if I just use the arrow keys. Okay, right click this guy, escape, arrow keys, okay. Now let's go in here and let's say find record. Now you'll notice that we didn't have to worry about any of these values over here, but it's a good idea to make sure everything's visible because you could have set your spreadsheet up a little bit different than mine and you don't want to mess anything up. So now everything's okay. So let's go ahead and re-hide this. Home tab, text color same as the background color, simple little trick. And we don't have to go ahead and do any, go to the review tab and hide this. We can just click the submit button. It'll tell us there's a bunch of errors. And now we cannot click any of these buttons out here, only these. Remember, this is the data validation feature. We can go ahead and kill the headings and grid lines if you want as well. And the formula bar. Now we're back to our form. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the VBA that we need to get this guy working. So Alt F11. Remember, if this guy is closed, just click the plus button up here to open it up. And you might have to use the password 123456. And if you're looking at this worksheet, just double click module 3. And I highly recommend you follow along with me with the spreadsheet that I have here, because how I like to do my tutorials, if you haven't watched them previously, is have the code already written out and then just go over it step by step with you. I find it's a little bit easier that way. So in module 3, we have a macro called select data. It's a little bit of database parlance because that's, if you are working with a database like MySQL, that's what you would call this. You are selecting data from the database. And so here we're just going to search the data repository and return the records. So let's talk about first the variables really quickly. This is actually a pretty simple macro. There's only a couple new things here for you guys that have been watching the other tutorials. So here first we have some variables declared. They're going to hold the references to the worksheets. If you remember, all that means is lower down, once we set this source sheet equal to the sheet with our form on it, we will not have to write sheets and form each time. We'll just have to write source sheet. Then I have a couple other variables that are basically going to hold text and numbers, and then data ID column. That's going to be an interesting one, kind of just an extension of the worksheet variables. So variables, you don't have to declare them, remember, but it does make your life a little bit easier, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these right here. So let's go to where we declare our source sheet. The first part mirrors the very last tutorial. So source sheet, we want this to hold a reference to the sheet with our form on it. So this worksheet right here. So what you have to do if you want it to reference an actual object instead of just a value, the object here is the worksheet, is you have to type set. So what we want to do is to set the source sheet variable equal to the worksheet form. So just the name of the worksheet here and sheets here. Then we do the very same thing with the data worksheet. And this makes it so that we don't ever have to type in again form or data. If we want to change the worksheets later or you want to change it for your workbook, just change these two entries right here and you don't have to change the corresponding code below. Now the other thing that we did here, we didn't do this in the last one, is I set a variable equal to an entire range on the data sheet. So we want a reference to the column that's going to hold our unique ID values. Remember from the last tutorial, if we go to the data sheet, this ID column, we want this to be full of unique values. So each row should have a different ID. This is how you do it with a database. It's very standard stuff. But each one needs to be unique. So we're not going to be storing multiple records with the same IDs in this example. We have to reference the column that's going to hold the ID. So what we do here, we don't just set it equal to that column. Here it says range BB. I need to update that because our ID is actually in column A now. So let's first update that. You can't just set it to range AA. You need to tell it on which sheet. So we set the data ID column variable equal to actually we start from the right here, equal to range A, the entire column on the data sheet. So instead of data sheet, you could have just written out sheets data like that. But here we don't have to, so data sheet, range AA. If you're in an older version of Excel, one before 2007, you may need to do something like this, A1 to 65,000. You can't just put AA like that in there. But most of you will probably be on Excel 2007 or later, so we can just do an entire column reference. The next thing is we need to get the value for which to search. So here we have search value. Now I set this equal to a variant up here. Basically it means that it can be lots of different things. So it doesn't just have to be an integer or text or string. It can be a lot of different things. And so technically you don't really even need to have this line up here. But here's where we get our input box, the little pop-up window. So when I clicked the button at the beginning of this tutorial, a little window popped up. This is where it came from. So first we use this variable guy right here. I'll explain how that works in a moment, but it's this code that makes it pop up. So let me hit run right here. Run the macro. You can see our pop-up window right here. We have a title, record search, and it says input an ID. Then we have an OK and a cancel button, and a little input thing down here where you can put the number. So the format of this window is standard. And there's a few different things you can change on this, but really all we need for this example is we want to change the title and to tell the user what to type in. So let's hit cancel. And so here you can see we have the text that tells the user what to do, input an ID, and the title right here. Like I said, there's more stuff you can do for this, but 99% of the time, this is all you're going to need. Now, how do we get the value that the user inputs there? Well, we set a variable equal to this. So that's what the search value variable does. The search value is going to be equal to whatever the user has typed into the input box. So once the user types something in or they hit OK or cancel, then we need to figure out if they returned a value. Did they give us something? So that's where this little line comes in. Check if the user input a value and hit the OK button. So they could also hit the enter button. It doesn't matter. So what we do is we see if search value does not equal VB null string. Basically, that means, did the user enter some value? And did the user then hit OK or enter on the keyboard? If they did, then we continue down here. If they did not, then we go all the way down here to the very end if, and we do nothing more. So there's nothing more after this. So this is how we ensure that code will only run if the user inputs a value. Now back up here. So this, by the way, is just a less than and a greater than sign back to back. So it's not a special sign or anything, just less than, greater than sign. And this is a special little thing in VBA, which essentially means exactly what I just said, if it's not empty. So if there's a value for it or not. All right, now that the user has input something, let's do something with a form. The very first thing that we want to do is to clear the data. And that's important because if there is no value found, we don't want to show the user the values that were currently in there because it might confuse them. So if we have some records over here from, let's say, Thanos or Judge Dredd, and they're already in here, and then we search for a new record, and it says no record found, but we still see stuff over here, it can be kind of confusing. So that's just a usability thing. You don't have to have this if you don't want to. And it follows the same pattern that we did in the last tutorial. So first, we reference the source sheet. Then we go to the range that we'd like to do something with, range F4, so cell F4. What do we want to do? We want to change the value of it. What do we want to change it to? Nothing. So empty quotation marks. And just do that for the entire form. Easy peasy. Now, here is the kind of second new thing after the input box. How we're going to search through the data worksheet. There are a bunch of different ways on how to do that. I've shown you a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different tutorials. But here, we only need to return one record. We're going to keep it nice and simple. And we're going to use .find, so the find method. And you may notice before I start that we do have one other range variable here that I forgot to declare at the top of the macro. And you'll see that it doesn't hurt the macro when it's running. This macro and this code isn't large enough for that to actually matter. But you could go ahead and put this variable up here and declare it if you wanted to. But this is just an example how you can do it, but you don't necessarily exactly have to do it, especially if you're on a tight schedule and your boss cares about the result and not the minutia of this. So let's go back. Now, how do you use find? Pretty simple. First, you tell it where to search for something. And this is where the data ID column variable comes up. So what you could do here, and what you'll see in most examples online, is someone would just type sheets, then the name of the worksheet, then maybe .cells, then .find. But here, since I want to make it easier for you guys and to make the code a bit more maintainable long term, that's why we put this up here. So data ID column, we're going to search data sheet in range A, column A. So that's where we're going to search. Then you just type .find, and you actually need almost none of these options that I have here. But I included some really basic options just so you can see how you can change things, and I'll cover that in a moment. The one that you for certain need is the what. So what are you actually going to search for? So you have open parentheses here, and then you have the name of the arguments. And this is one way that you can fill out the arguments in VBA, is you type the name of the argument, then you type a colon, equal sign, and then what you want to put for that argument. So this argument is what you're going to search for. And here we're going to search for the search value. Search value we got from here, from our input box. Now down here, a couple other options. The look-in argument tells you what to look in. You can do formulas, you can do different kinds of things within the cell, basically just saying what kind of find are you going to perform. Here we just want to look for the values. Now look at, we want to look at the entire cell contents as opposed to a part of a cell. And search order, we want to go by rows because we're going up and down, so XL by rows. Match case, that's actually a pretty good one. Do you want to make sure that the capitals have to match, or does it not matter? If you're searching for someone's name, you may want to match case or not match case. If your ID number is something like YouTube, where they have capital letters that are different or separate than the lowercase versions, then you want to make sure that match case is true instead of false. Here it doesn't matter. Now what I did is I put a link here for Microsoft's website that'll give you all the arguments that you can do for the find method, and it will explain what they are. Now sometimes they don't give you the best explanation, but they have all of the stuff listed out there, and that's a good place to start from. And if you have any more questions, you can go to teachexcel.com and ask us about that there. But that's a great place to start at to get more information on this find method. Now the result is going to be in this range variable, and the range variable is going to hold the range that was matched. Did it find something or did it not find something? And this is how you check if this find method found something. It's just like this. And if you forget it, just open this workbook and copy paste it, because this is always how it's going to be. If not range, this is this variable right here, is nothing, then. Then it found a record. So it's confusing, but it's basically what it sounds like. If it found a range, then the record was found. And the way that it goes about doing that is this kind of trickery of not negates if something was found or not, so it reverses true or false. I think there's a similar function in the worksheet actually. And then is nothing just checks if something was returned or not. So like I said, that sounds kind of confusing. Just copy paste this guy right here. And remember that when you're inside the if statement there, it means a record was found. But now how do you do anything useful once you found a record is you need to get the location. And there are a couple different things you can do here, but for us, we only want the row. So since our data, each row is unique, we only need the row, and then we can get all the other data that we need. So what we do is we reference this range variable, remember, right here, and we type .row. There's lots of other things you can do though. So if you wanted the full address of the cell, you could do rng.address address, and that'll give you the address of the cell. You could do column if you wanted the column of the cell. But all we need here is the row. So now once we have the row, we have everything we need to get data. So here, all we have to do is to fill our form with data. So what do we want to do? We want to go to our source sheet where our form is. We want to go to this range here, F4. What do we want to do? Change the value. What do we want to change it to? Our database sheet, and we want to change it to a cell. Remember, this is just like range. We're doing a range reference using cells. We want to go to record row. So the row where our record was found, right here. And we want to go to column 2. And I believe that should be the name column now. What do we want to get from that cell reference, from this cell reference here? We want to get the value. So all we're doing is popping one value into another value. And just do this for the rest of your form. There are different ways to do this, but this is the easiest way to do it. Copy, paste, change the column references, change the cell references over here, and you'll be good to go. Remember that half the battle when you're doing any sort of programming like this is to make it so that you understand what you did 6 months from now. So try and keep it simple if you can. And down here we just have a message box that shows if nothing was found. So we go up. Here is our find. We put it into the range variable. We do this little trickery right here to see if a record was found. And then going down, down, down. Here is what shows if no record was found. We simply output a message box, record not found. Put whatever you want there. Then we close up this end if, then we close up the other end if that sees if a value was input, and then we are done. So you can see the macro is relatively simple. There's only a couple of new concepts. This find thing right here. Remember, to figure out if the record was found, just copy paste this guy. It's something you're not going to use that often, to be fair. So just copy paste it. Don't worry about it. Up here, simple thing to clear the data. And then here is our lovely input box. And you can see we do another thing here to see if the search value is not equal to VB null string. So a little bit easier than the find method if statement. And everything else is pretty much similar to what we did before. So let's go ahead, go back to the spreadsheet, attach it to find record. Of course, we have to go back here, unprotect the sheet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right click, assign macro. It's off the screen right now. Third from bottom option. Go to select data, hit OK. Now let's go protect the sheet. Oh, we don't need to hit protect sheet, just hit submit. Escape, submit. Now it should be protected again. Yep. All right, now let's find the record. 111, enter. Perfect. Let's go for 222. Perfect. And let's make sure that our cancel button works. Perfect. Hit the close button. Perfect. Hit the escape button. Perfect. You always want to make sure that you check those things at the end because you don't want it to randomly crash on someone else's computer because they'll freak out and it'll mess things up. So now we have a fully working find record button, a submit button. We've got our data worksheet fixed so the ID is on the left and the name is on the right. And we are starting to get quite a series of macros over here with our validate form macro, store data macro, and select data macro. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. We're starting to get a pretty decent working form over here now. And the next tutorial will show you how to update a record. I'm certain you can see kind of where that's going after this tutorial. And then after that, I'll show you how to delete a record from the data worksheet. So stay tuned, we got a lot more coming. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.